From the heart of Lake Charles, Louisiana, to the forefront of medical innovation and social activism, Dr. Russell J. Ledet embodies the spirit of perseverance and dedication. A proud veteran, Dr. Ledet's naval service is marked by distinction and valor, earning him multiple accolades for his exceptional leadership and unwavering commitment. Dr. Ledet, Russell, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken. I'm super excited to be here.
One thing I read about you on your site, from securing buildings to securing the future of healthcare.
Yeah.
Tell us, break that down for us a bit.
Yeah. I was a security guard for a pretty long time. And prior to that, I was in the military. Um, so security has been a part of my life, this idea of being a source of protection for people has been a component of my life for a pretty long time. And, I think about the way that I'm doing that now as a training pediatrician, adult psychiatrist, and child and adolescent psychiatrist is a means of me doing the exact same thing, but just with a totally different mechanism and approach. And so I think it's very appropriate for the journey I've been on to get here.
So interesting though, because I mean, I'd never thought of it that way. So it's secure, it's securing, but it's also, are you securing or are you providing more of an emotional armor or ability? I'm not sure I'm saying that right. Seems to be like a double-edged look at it now.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways that you can look at it. Centralizing myself for the conversation, for me personally, I do think that, I'm providing some security for folks. A lot of people, especially people who come from disadvantaged and marginalized backgrounds, they don't oftentimes interact with someone in the healthcare system who understands and is able to provide gravity to their lived experience. That's kind of what I specialize in, you know? And so there's a sense of security that comes from finding, a place of emotional security where you can unleash some of the things that you probably aren't able to disclose to everyone. And for it to be a safety place feels good. Also, for it to be a place of relatability feels very good, or at least that's what my patients have said, and that's what I've seen from them. And so I think in that sense, it's pretty reasonable to think of it as a form of security. I also think it's important to look at it as a form of security because, the thing about psychiatry is you disclose things that you don't tell everyone else, and then you get help for it in a hopefully non-judgmental way. That can feel like security for a lot of people because in many other instances, they haven't been able to share that information in a way that feels authentic and feels appreciated and feels like it's been handled with care and security.
So as you discuss that, I mean, turn back the clock for me a bit so that I better understand. Are you growing up thinking I'm going to the Navy because I want to become a doctor? Am I going to the Navy because I don't see a pathway? Like what?
Yeah,
What is
that's a
it?
good question. I think I went to the Navy because it was the most promising option at the time.
Okay.
I'm very much a person who does a lot of risk management personally. I kind of look at the options I have in front of me because you always have options. I looked at the options in front of me. I could try to figure out this college thing, but my mom wasn't that adept with regards to how to apply to college, if we were going to have the money for it, where was I going to stay, what was I going to do, those kinds of things. There was college, there was the military, which had some dangerous components to it, but overall felt safe. And then there was just staying home and just getting a job.
Right.
And that might have been third on the list. Going to college seemed pretty far fetched because I didn't really know anyone who had gone to college, like a 4-year college, and really had no idea like what was the entry point, what was the access point to go to college. But the military felt attainable. It felt, like it was proximal. That my recruiter also played basketball with me at the local community center. It felt tangible. It felt real. It felt like it was a fresh start, and it was instant economic benefit, which is a hard thing to attain out of high school.
Right.
Generally, coming out of high school, you don't have a resume, and so it's not like you can go and get, a job where you'll make, an appreciable amount of money. And so the military felt like the best option for me at the time. While the military, I didn't go to the military with the idea of like, yes, I will eventually become a doctor. I did go to the military with the idea like, this is most definitely an opportunity for me to see something different than I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I probably need to take advantage of it because when am I going to be 18 again? Probably never. My knees will never be this strong ever again. My back will never be this strong ever again. I'll never be this fast again. I'll never have this much energy again. And I'll never have this little debt again. And so it felt like a win.
What's interesting though, when you tell the story back, a lot of it seems to go to what you believed was attainable at the time. That roadmap. I mean, and we'll talk about it, but you've obviously bridged to supporting not just your patients, but so many in the community.
Yeah.
Was that an answer to realizing that I only saw one real path?
I think in some ways, the component about helping my community was totally organic. I think the the impetus to do so was innate because I watched my grandmother do it. I watched my mom do it with the bare minimum. I still watch them help, people in the community. Even when my grandmother could not read, she used to sign her name with an X. And my mom had only graduated high school, and my dad never lived with us. But they still all figured out ways to help the community. So I felt like I had a lot of examples, and I think that part of my thinking was innate. I think the materialization of that innate, thought pattern, I guess is probably the best way to put it, was organic. I remember I was probably about 19 or 20 years old, and we were deployed, and we were in Casablanca, Morocco. And we went to this small little town outside of Casablanca and went on what's called a community relations event, which was kind of like the military's way of like giving back to wherever we went into port, right? And I remember looking around at all these kids at this orphanage and bringing Reese's cups and talking with the kids and eating couscous and chicken with them and all those kinds of things and saying to myself like, yeah, I love doing this. And so when I came back, got off active duty, went to the reserves, and was in college, it made sense for me to continue that because I genuinely enjoy giving back and getting really nothing in return except for the satisfaction that people in my community were better off because I played a role in it. And so I think the materialization component is somewhat married to the innate examples, the experiential examples I got as a child. But I also think that like opportunities just came as time went on.
Was it opportunities coming? Was it that in tandem with, I guess, the confidence you built? Because still, and I don't know how long you spent in the military, but going from the military again to triple board resident, I mean, that's even just going to anything in a medical field. What an incredible leap, let alone
Yeah.
where you've taken it to.
Yeah. Ken, at the end of the day, one day someone will make a movie about my life. Somebody will make a movie about my life. That's what my gut feeling tells me. And that's also what my emails tell me.
Yeah.
At some point, someone will be like, "Hey, this probably makes sense for us to make a movie about your life because how the hell did you end up here? What like how what like where did this come from? How did this happen?" I always say there's two things that are not easily recognized that led to me being to where I'm at now that were paramount. The first is my faith in God. I'm fairly religious. I'm a practicing Christian. My faith in God has allowed me to take, even the word that you said, some leaps, some dangerous leaps that in hindsight I didn't realize were that dangerous. But I was like, what alternative do I have?
Hmm.
I don't, it's not like I can go back home and like magically become this thing that I've been exposed to. I never forget, I was an undergrad and I was at a talk in Mississippi. If I'm not mistaken, I still have the guy's phone number. I just don't remember his name. He was the first black man I ever met who was an MD PhD. He had gone to Harvard and I was enamored. I was like, wow, this guy's an MD, PhD. He's a physician scientist. And he's a black man. I was like, this is crazy. And so being exposed to that was like, it was almost like opening Pandora's box. It was like, well, that's a possibility. That's a thing that I can become. Is it going to be hard? I don't think I ever asked myself the question of whether or not it would be hard. I just was like, yeah, I think that's what I want to do. Did I know how I was going to do it? No, I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I just like prayed a lot and whatever. And so that's the first part is my faith in God, God allowing me to be in the rooms and in places where I could meet what my future could possibly become
Right.
was I think so much of that was divine. And then the other part was my wife. My wife is single-handedly my biggest supporter. She has been my biggest supporter since I was 17 years old. I've been with the same girl since I was 17 years old. Mallory has been, she's been, I'll tell you, here's the quintessential way to explain how impactful she has been. When I was young, I was like 18, 19 years old. I had just finished boot camp. I remember my wife and I were on the phone, and she said, "You do not surprise me when you succeed.
Hmm.
You surprise me when you fail. So try your very best to not surprise me, and we will be perfectly fine." And those words still carry me through the day every day. Those very words, they carry me every day. I don't have any expectation whatsoever that I will fail. I don't go into anything thinking I'm gonna fail because I just don't want to let her down. And because she's been by my side for so long, I think she deserves for me to give my very best because she's devoted so much time, so much energy, so much effort into what my future could be so that our family could be in a good position. This woman has like so much of who I am and how this world perceives me is a function of how she has just like been there in the trenches since day one. Kind of like Drake said, she was shooting in the gym. She was shooting in the gym when nobody else was looking. Yeah. So it's been a combination of those two things of why I've gotten to where I'm at. Having this hope that God would put me in the right places, but also this unwavering belief from this like stalwart of a woman who was like, nah, you gonna succeed. It ain't no question. And even if you fail, get your butt back up. We're gonna try again.
There has to be something, and maybe it's just who you are, that there has to be something that people see in you, meaning
Mm-hmm.
your wife, you
Mm-hmm.
you you, you talk about God. There are very few people who still have the gumption to try
Mhm.
to succeed in the way that you have. I mean, is that something that, and you're a psychiatrist now, you can help us through it. Is that something that is you think is built in? Is it something you developed? Is like because I completely hear what you're saying about those surrounding you, and I take nothing away because I understand completely. But there's something in you that has moved you apart from most.
Yeah, Ken, I've never had an opportunity to be afraid. I've never had an opportunity to be paralyzed by fear
Hmm.
because I've never had time to entertain fear. You know, there are people who have time to like ruminate on like, well, what if this doesn't work? And like, what if I fail? Or like, what if people laugh at me or whatever? Like, I don't have a backup option, bro. Like, this is it. The only pathway I had was forward. Like that was the only viable pathway was like, yeah, just like this is the only direction you can go is forward. You don't have nothing to go back to, in terms of like the hurricane messed up so much for my mom and
Hmm.
my dad, and really my family back home in Lake Charles. So much of my family, the hurricane just demolished. Like it, people would talk about my hurricane efforts, and they were covered on Good Morning America and a whole bunch of other stuff. But even before that, like my family and I, we come from some pretty tough socioeconomic environments. And so, I'll tell you this. I remember writing this tweet. This is when it was Twitter. A kid had asked me like, "Where does your work ethic come from?" And I was like, "Well, my mama was a certified nurse's aide, making minimum wage all my childhood, and she raised two kids on her own. She would work sometimes two jobs, three jobs, whatever it took. She did whatever had to be done. If you watch that long enough, it's like an infection. It'll get you, and you will learn how to persist and how to be resilient. And I think I learned that from my grandmother and my mama. And I always say on every podcast, I love my grandmother and I love my mama and I love my wife and my mother-in-law. Those four women have held me down for a very long time. But I will say I have learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot from the women in my life. I've always been surrounded by strong Black women who have unadulteratedly exposed me to no, you gonna earn everything you have. Nobody ain't gonna give you nothing. Nobody's gonna give you anything. So if you don't work for it, don't expect to have it. And the fact that I wasn't afraid to work was pretty helpful. The fact that I wasn't afraid to ask was extremely helpful. I would ask, bro, I'm never afraid to ask someone to mentor me or teach me what they know.
Hmm.
And I found over time, people love that. People love when you ask them about their expertise because they love to teach. They love to share people who are eager to learn. They love to share to people who are eager to learn. And I will say that this educational component, I think is mainly what you're talking about. I can tell you where that comes from. My desire to learn, especially from an academic perspective, came from deploying. When I deployed, especially when we were in Sevastopol, Ukraine, and Batumi, Georgia, Suda Greece, Morocco, Tunis, Tunisia, Cote d'Ivoire, Timagana, all these places, I realized that I was like privileged as hell. I was like, bro, who am I to not take advantage of every opportunity in front of me? Like, how dare I be in this position where I have access to high class education, like world class education. I don't have to pay for it because the GI Bill is what it is, and allow for me to go to school for free. But not only that, like I'm doing it in a safe environment. Like when I was in college, we didn't have any bombs on the campus. There was no crater of a, there was never a thought that there would be a bomb on campus. And so like I have taken advantage of what has been put in front of me. And at no point did I say to myself, what an inconvenience it is for me to have access to all this education. Because I was personally exposed to kids and people who never got this opportunity, who had probably more drive than me. They probably had like more to lose than me. So like, who am I to not take advantage of it? And then on top of that, who am I not to take what I have taken advantage of it and use it to benefit others? I think that's the philanthropic component of who I am. But I do think that I have realized that who am I not to take advantage of what I've been given? Not to mention, I'm a history buff. I understand what my ancestry has been through for me to be in this place I'm in. Who am I not to take advantage of? Like who am I to spit on the sacrifices of my ancestors? Who am I to do that? That'd be crazy.
You know, you talk about the privilege, and it's a level of gratefulness you don't often hear. I think we hear on this specific podcast because we are looking to find exceptional individuals, but yours still takes it to a level, privilege of not grabbing onto every opportunity, not looking at what I'm sure, you are making it sound like a bit of a cruise.
No, it ain't been a
I,
cruise.
I don't think it was, but the fascination and interest in how you took everything in, and now how you are giving it back. Tell us a bit about 15 White Coats and how you sort of turned your privilege into offering others a privilege.
Yeah. The 15 white coats was started after we took this photo that went viral. Um, this photo came out of an opportunity. Um, Me and a bunch of my classmates had went to the Whitney plantation in Edgar, Louisiana. And prior to that, I sent them an email saying like, yo, this is an opportunity for us to remember how far we've come. And it's an opportunity for us to also show the world how far we've come. Sometimes you need a reminder, but you also need to remind others.
Mhm.
So it was kind of this bimodal opportunity. And um, we took the photos and they went absolutely viral. Um, and as a function of them going viral and us getting all this notoriety, I remember me and Sydney Labat, Dr. Sydney Labat, and Rachel Turner, and a couple of others sitting down and coming to the decision that we could do one of two things. We could take all of this clout and use it for personal notoriety, or we could take all of this clout and do something that could change the world. We could put these photos up in classrooms and have kids have conversations about what does the next Surgeon General look like? What community do they come from? Who has the ability to don a white coat? So there's that part. There's the ability of us to raise some money to help the next generation to become doctors. And then obviously there was the part for us to build a literature mechanism that would allow for kids from marginalized communities to have access to literature that reflects their lived experience, which are the three pillars of the 15 white coats. And so we just made a decision to do what would make our ancestors proud. And I think up until now, we, we've raised millions of dollars and we've helped thousands of people to join the medical field. And we've helped thousands of kids to see that maybe becoming a doctor is not as far-fetched as I thought it would be, or Dr. Labat thought it would be, or Dr. Turner thought it would be.
I'm rarely at a loss for words. So, um, no, it really, it's funny. You don't really think about passion coming through a little screen, but the thoughtfulness, and I mean that on all levels, that comes from you about who you are, the appreciation of everything that's been put in front of you, even if many would have possibly mishandled or not even recognized it, it's really quite remarkable. So, if I may, I just have one last question for you, and
Yeah.
if you can tell us maybe about the Bootless Foundation.
Yeah. The Bootless Foundation came from a comment that was made by Dr. Martin Luther King in 1969, or I think maybe it was 1964. I don't remember the exact year, but there was a year where he was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, "What is it about the Negro that they can't lift themselves up by their own bootstraps? Why is it that they can't thrive in this new land?" Which he was referring to as America. And Martin Luther King very simply said, "It is a cruel jest to tell a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps and not give him any boots." And he was referring to the fact that so many other people have been given economic opportunities, social opportunities, structural opportunities to lift themselves up and did not give that to the lineage of slaves.
Hmm.
And so I wrote this article for Nature about 6 months after George Floyd died. The editor for the magazine called me and said, like, "Hey, I need you to write about the juxtaposition of experience in medicine and science and being authentically yourself in this space." And I told her about this journey of being bootless, of having to figure out a way of how to find your own boots, find your own laces, lace up your own boots, and then pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And there's no one to relieve you while you're lifting your own self up by your bootstraps. There's no one to come along and say, "Hey, I got it right now." You have to be the person to build that for the next generation. And I trademarked Bootless after that and started this foundation with my wife because we want to be extremely intentional about ensuring that the next generation has the mental capacity to navigate the challenges of being bootless. And then hopefully we can help them with the economic capacity and the relational capacity to navigate being bootless. Because I think that's what the future can look like for them.
Well, it sounds like from the emotional and the physical and the role model, you are leaving the opportunity for a much brighter, much more wonderful, challenging, but accessible future,
Yeah.
if you will. So, Dr. Russell Ledet, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I cannot wait to see the movie because there are very few individuals who actually deserve it. But I think you're just a beacon. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it, Camian. And just you guys know you have a friend in me. So if you ever need me to come back on, just let me know. I appreciate you all having me on.
Thank you.
Yep.